Hello, thank you for clicking on this video. It is my first intentionally produced video, and so technical errors might arise due to my inexperience. What I want to show for you today is my method for formatting a scripture passage to PowerPoint slides. We're going to be looking at Psalm 73 as an example, and here is the PowerPoint slide sequence that as I taught through this particular psalm, this is are the slides the congregation saw as we went through the passage. Here I have an individual verse, but my primary point in making a slide is not merely to have a verse per slide. There may be times, like for instance here, I have two verses. My primary principle for presenting a slide is not a slide containing an individual verse. I always try to have an individual slide at minimum contain a complete sentence. In other words, I make my slide determinations at the most minimum level with regards to final punctuation. In other words, where is the final punctuation of the sentence that's being here? And so rather than the idea that this is two verses, for my presentation's sake, this is two sentences because we have a period here. We have a period here. Here we have 1, 2, 3, 4 sentences. Here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sentences. The verse references are merely there for reference sake. The interpretation of a passage should not be in accordance to verse divisions, but in accordance to the thought flow of the passage. And I'm always of the conviction that a congregation needs to see the whole thought unit. Now, ideally, you would be able to present on a slide the entirety of the passage you are preaching through, but unfortunately the formats of vision don't allow for the presentation of the entirety of Psalm 73 upon a screen because the point size of the passage would be so small no one could read it, and thus eliminating the very point of projecting it. And so decisions have to be made with regards to how to present the thought units, the sentences here. One thing I want you to note here in this Psalm 73, 16 through 17, the sentence, this is actually, according to the punctuation used here, this is actually one sentence, but it is two verses. Remember, these verses were added later, sometimes arbitrarily. Here we have the first portion of the sentence, this indicated by this semicolon, and then you have the last portion of it being presented here after the semicolon with this particular period. We'll talk a little bit more about how and why I'm formatting in this form for the in the Psalms, but you can see here here I've done these different slides, and these are what as I taught through this particular psalm, I presented it in this format and making my comments and my points as we went through this. But here you can see, here is the final presentation here in the PowerPoint slides. But what I want to show you today is how did I get this text to these slides. Now, what I could have done is I could have looked at my Bible and I could have individually typed in to each slide this particular passage. That would take some time to do so. Now, one of the advantages of that would be it would enable me to have to go through the text, and so sometimes going through the text and having to take that technique of typing it in, can become a kind of study time. However, it is very time intensive. You may have ministry assistants whose job is to make your slides for your teaching, but it would then require them to have a large amount of time. Now, they could either type it in, or they could, in particular, they could cut and paste, but even that is a time-consuming sort of thing. And so I want to show you today how to do this more quickly. So basically, in order to do this, there are two programs that are coordinated together. It is the PowerPoint program and also Microsoft Word. I am not the hugest fan of Microsoft Word. I have some real problems with it, but one of the features of Microsoft Word, it does have a useful function in that you can take a document that is prepared in Microsoft Word, you can format it in a particular way, and then you can send it to Microsoft PowerPoint, and it will format the text so that if you format it correctly, it will then take the document that you have made, and then it will transfer that content so that you have portions of your content with your title section here, and then it'll put the other parts of your document into this section, and it'll then also divide it into individual slides. And so that is what I'm going to be showing you now. So I open Word. Now, what you then need to do is you need to transfer your biblical text to this. You could type it in yourself. You could go to Bible Gateway or any other program that has the Bible text, and you could have it then placed in here. I particularly, I use BibleWorks. I'm using BibleWorks 10. Unfortunately, at this time, September of 2018, BibleWorks is no longer available for purchase at this particular time. I was fortunate enough to have a copy of the program before they shut down the purchasing of new licenses. Hopefully in the future it will become available again. But my main point is, the purpose is find the biblical text that you are going to need to format into PowerPoint slides, where however you do so, and then have it transferred. So here I am going to select and copy my entire passage here in order to get that transferred. Now, BibleWorks has a function where you can select it and you could transfer it by clipboard, or it even allows you to copy it to Word. And so since I've already opened up Word, and here we have it copied in there. Now, BibleWorks does present the passage reference here at the bottom. Whenever you copy it, we do not need that into a slide, so I go ahead and delete that. One of the things about BibleWorks is when it does verses like this, it places a blank, a space in front of the verse numbers, and so I first go through and I eliminate that blank space. So that all of the text will be left justified so that it evens up. So this is the first formatting procedure that we are dealing with. Also, I prefer to be able to see my text, and so I am going to enlarge this to a little bit larger sort of a format so that I can see. Now here, something that is unique to the Psalms, because it is poetry, I want to show to the congregation the ideas of how poetry can be visually understood. In English poetry, we recognize poetry many times by the use of rhyme at the ends of the sentences, or the flow of the sentences that have rhyme in some sort of pattern. In Hebrew poetry, it is more of a parallel statements, whether they are having a statement and then having a restatement of that statement, or a kind of a synonymous statement, and we'll try to point that out as we move through this. But I like to format it in such a way so that it is seen visually, those parallels of the particular passage. So what I'm going to have to do to visually do that, I am going to have to move the text into a particular way. Now, fortunately, the New American Standard Version, the version I'm using here, it has this indicated through the use of capital letters. If this had been in a printed Bible, these would have already been placed in the parallel sort of format. But because I'm taking this from BibleWorks in the way that I copied it, I'm going to have to do this manually. But the advantage of having to do this manually, it does give me a chance to go through the text in order to reflect upon the meaning here. But here we are, because there's a capital letter here. I'm going to put this on the next line. And here, let me show you with this verse 2, this idea of parallelism. Here we have, but as for me, my feet came close to stumbling. And here the parallel idea, my steps had almost slipped. Here we have feet and the action, the stumbling action, and here we have my steps, which is exactly what feet do. Feet step in front of one another, and then we have this parallel concept of slipping, which is synonymous somewhat conceptually with this idea of stumbling. So here we have in this next sentence, for I was envious of the arrogant, and then we have the parallel line, as I saw the prosperity of the wicked. This begins to advance the idea while still retaining some of the parallelism. Here we have arrogant being stated in parallel to the wicked, but then we get an advancement of the idea. Here we have the response, this envy response in the psalmist, but we then see the cause of that envious response. And so the advancement of the concept here, as we see, it's because of the prosperity of the wicked being here. So here, as I go through, I'm going to format this so that we have all of these parallel ideas. And so this is a very simple thing, especially if this is being done by your ministry assistant. All your ministry assistant has to know is that when they see a capital letter in Psalms, that is your indicator to move it to the next line in order to get the concept of parallelism in the Psalms. So here we're moving through this, doing this line by line, coming to each one of them in order to get this proper format here. Now, of course, if we were in another passage of Scripture, if it was not Hebrew poetry, this would be something that you wouldn't do, because you would not have this parallelism. But you then would need to make your decisions with regards to how you want to present it per slide. Are you going to present a slide per verse or per sentence? I think I've stated previously I prefer to present sentence by sentence. Now, sometimes that's just going to be per verse, but there are some times that the verse divisions come in a strange way, and it seems rather arbitrary. There doesn't seem to be a meaningful concept that causes the division between verses. It just seems to be there. We have to remember that the chapter and verse divisions, especially in the narrative text, They came much later, hundreds to thousands of years later. They were not part of the original text, and so we don't think we need to be doing anything contrary to the inspired scripture by not having our interpretation in accordance to the verse divisions. Those were there primarily for quick reference. Now, we do have a singular unit with regards to an individual psalm, but the psalm is the whole unit. Now, ideally, as mentioned before, we would present this, because it's one thought unit, because it's one psalm, we would present this on a singular slide. But if we were to do that, the text would be so small it would not be visible. So what we need to do is we need to get this into a format so that we can have it on a slide so that a congregation can read it, but also within a unit so that as the preacher or teacher, you can then present it to the congregation in a way that you can read it, they can read it, and they can reflect upon what is up there within the smallest thought unit available, which I would suggest would be the sentence. So we have to make the decisions how to do this, but how do we do this quickly without having to individually copy this and then go over to our PowerPoint program and then copy it into the individual things? So that's what I want to show you at this time. Now, I do want to go ahead and put a verse reference here. As for verse 1, I know we have it here, but I'm going to add a 1 space, highlight it, and I have here the superscripted so that it is superscripted like we do have our verse references. Okay, so here's what we do now. We have this, we have it in our parallelism, we are able to see our punctuation. So what we now need to do with regards to the ribbons up here, we need to go to the view. To the view tab, we open the view tab, and we then find the outline button. This is under the views. What you're looking for right now, we're in print layout, in the views, and then we want to go to outline. So we go to outline. Now you will notice in this outline right now, the outlining has this formatted as a body text. What we want to do first, and there are several different ways to do it, but first here's my technique. I first highlight all of them with a left click and pull down. We then go here to this arrow to the outline level and place it to level 2. Level 2. And what that does is that formats it at a level 2 outline level. Now what this does is it means that all of this text is going to be in, if I were to transfer it now, it would be in this particular block. That entire text would be placed into one block of the individual slide. What we want to do now is we want to have each slide divided. And so here's what we do. Now, one of the things I go ahead and do here is I like to place it in Arial font. That's just me. You can pick whatever kind of font you want to use, and I always like to bold everything, put everything in bold, but that's your own decisions and how you want to format that. Now, here's how we make the title slides for individual slides. We take this, and there's several ways to do it. You could click on it and then make this be a level 1, and you could, or you could just, nope, let's see here. Here, I'll show you. I decided to have my next slide be at to make my comments on this as my first slide, and so then I wanted my second slide to start here. Well, I make this as my second slide. And now we could say, now I want to say, okay, what I could make each individual sentence into a separate slide, or as I'm going through the psalm, I could say that I want to get more of an idea of the connections between the sentences as much as possible so that it is still readable on a particular slide. And so I then have to do some interpretive work in which I then say, are these sentences here, do they kind of build an argumentation? Do they build an idea that I could conceivably place on one slide so that as I talk about it, I can show how the sentences work together to advance the idea or the argumentation of the psalm. So one instance we could do, if I was to place, let's do verses 2 and 3, or these two sentences here, and that would be another slide. As we talk about, but as for me, my feet came close to stumbling, my steps had almost slipped, complete sentence, but then this next sentence gives the reason for this response. And so that's why I conceptually wanted to link those two together. Now we need to make the next decision of where it would work. Now you could make the division, with regards to each sentence, but now you could make a division here, and the reason for that here, and here I am grabbing it with a left click, and then I'm pulling it to the left here, making this. Now you'll notice here, these pullovers here, this is a level 1 level. Level 1, notice here in the outlining, this is a level 1. Whereas this is a level 2. What this does is this will place, when you format it to your PowerPoint, this will make this the title box, these level 1 outlining levels, whereas this will be the body text box. That's why we're making these. So this will be one slide, this will be a second slide, this will be a third slide. So here we go. As we move through, we then begin to see, you could put another conceptual thought unit here, as we say, therefore pride is their necklace, the garment of violence covers them, their eye bulges from fatness, the imaginations of their heart run riot. This is what one of the results of their life. And which is one of the reasons why there is this envy previously in the psalm. This shows a description of them. This then also begins here. These two sentences here. They're describing their actions. Now you could conceivably decide to make these two slides here, or if you wanted to hold them together, but you think, okay, those would here I am. Every once in a while you'll make a mistake, and so you'll need to correct them by pulling them left. But there we go. And you can always delete these lines. Now, sometimes when I'm doing these slides, in order to format it in a way that's more visual so that people can see the breakdown, sometimes I will insert a blank line within this body part of it while still retaining it on the same slide. But sometimes you can just let them all run together. But you could think of this in terms as a thought unit, a progression of the psalm. It's your decision on how you want to put that in a slide. Here, I'll make another division here just by how I thought how it should be divided. Here is kind of a conclusion statement in the exasperation and frustration of the psalmist in what they are saying. Now, here, this is the response to the frustration of the psalmist, that as he reflects upon the wicked. He talks about describing the wicked. This verse 12 is kind of a summary of his frustration over the wicked. And then here, this is his internal response, his frustration, his honesty before the Lord. Surely in vain I have kept my heart pure and washed my hands in innocence. For I have been stricken all day long and chastened every morning. This exasperated complaint here. And so I wanted to put those two ideas together as I was presenting that to the congregation. And then I decided to make this to be a individual slide to talk about. This is the transition. This is how he had been feeling, the honesty of his frustration about the wicked. But then we have this sentence here. If I had said, I will speak thus, meaning all this stuff here, letting this be my final perception of things, then behold, I would have betrayed the generation of your children. I would leave a legacy that would be difficult for the following generations. And so here I isolated that as a transition sort of slide in order to talk about my exposition. So then now I made this to be the next conclusion, the next slide that is being presented here. When I pondered to understand this, it was troublesome in my sight until I came into the sanctuary of God. Then I perceived their end. Here, in juxtaposition to this honest frustration, this anger, this emotional turmoil in thinking about the prosperity of the wicked, and how honestly it was troubling him. But then he juxtaposes that as he's approaching the sanctuary of God. Here you get the idea, as we realize that he's coming into the sanctuary of God. Here you kind of can contrast that to the idea, but as for me, my feet came close to stumbling. My steps had almost slipped as he's going to worship services, as he's walking to the temple, to the tabernacle. Here he is, he's going, but when he finally arrives to the sanctuary of God, where he places his frustrations in juxtaposition to the presence of God, to the worship of God, this gave him the proper perspective to have with regards to the wicked. And so I created another slide unit there, and here you of course could put these sentences together. I think I chose to put them separately. Here's another one. He's confessing that when I put my focus upon the wicked and their prosperity, I was embittered. I was pierced within. I was senseless and ignorant. I was like a beast before you. But here he's beginning to understand the presence of God in his life. And so that's giving him new perspective. Here we have this new section here, whereas he's reflecting upon God's presence in his life and how that gives him better perspective and how God is guiding him. Here we have this portion here, my flesh and my heart may fail, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever. See, the wicked, they do indeed, as we take a look up here. The wicked increase in wealth. The wicked have all sorts of blessing. There's prosperity in their lives. But here the psalmist is realizing that his ultimate desires, his ultimate strength of his heart, his portion forever, what he truly inherits is God's presence in his life. And here we have this final idea here. These two sentences here. For behold, those who are far from you will perish. You have destroyed all those who are unfaithful to you. But as for me, The nearness of God is my good. I have made the Lord God my refuge, that I may tell of all your works. Just a little footnote, whenever I indicate to my congregation that whenever they see an all capitals in the Old Testament, this is a indicator, at least in the New American Standard Version, an indicator that this is the personal name of God revealed to Moses. And so that's why the capitals are there. So here we formatted it. Now, what I do is I then want to put the actual verse numbers here into this, and so that's why I paste here in these title sections. And remember, these are the level ones. I paste my reference here that this is Psalm 73 for each one of these slides, so that when they do see the slide up on the screen, they do know where it comes from. You wouldn't necessarily have to do this, because even the blank pulling over of a level 1, that does create the slide division, so you do not have to necessarily put any content into these levels. I happen to, because there may come a point as I'm preaching through and as I'm reading the screen myself that I might want to reference what actual number it is, or what range of numbers that we have here, and so I go ahead and place that on the slide so that I can see. We now add the numbers here, and I go up, showing that each slide here we have the range from 25, 21 through 22, 20, 18 through 19, 16 through 17. And you can do this in any way. You could do it as you're doing your divisions here, going through it. You could go ahead and type this in for each one as you do it, or you can do it after you have formatted here. We're getting close to the end. 2 through 3. Okay, so here we have level ones. These will place the text into the title box. This is the body box of PowerPoint, and then this tells PowerPoint when you transfer it, make a slide, make a slide, make a slide. So you can close the outline view. Close the outline view. This is what it looks like in Word. And it kind of looks the same. You won't necessarily see how it works exactly, but the formatting is there. So all I do here now is I send it to Microsoft PowerPoint. So here we've sent it. It is creating a new PowerPoint presentation, and this is how it ends up. Now you could, of course, decide, now here I'm going to enable editing. And you could, of course, present it like this. I don't like this because it's inserted these bullet points into this. Now, one way, once you've done this before, one way you can do it is you can just copy all of those like so. You can go to a particularly one that you've already done. Go to the end and right click and make sure when you paste it using the destination theme, pasting the destination theme, and you will notice here how, see what I did basically is I ended this one. Let's see, make sure. Oh, here I know what I did. Let's see here. This was the original. Oh, I don't know that I copied it. Copy. Now we go to the previous formatted one. Now we do copying. Okay, so here we have here. Okay, this was the previous slide that I had here. Let's see, what have I done here? Okay. Okay. This is the previous one. Now, these are the new slides I've had, but you'll notice here, these have the bullet points, but as we go to this one, the bullet points have disappeared as we've added those. The reason why is when we added it using the destination theme. The theme of formatting that came from this presentation is the formatting for these new added slides. Now what I would then do in order to add this, I would then erase all my previous slides. Well, this happens to be the very same sort of thing, same passage, so I just added it to the same format there. Let me go ahead and undo that so that I don't have it doubled up, and I'm back to, now let's see, let's do that again. Oh, I see what I did here. Okay, there we go. Now we're back. This is the original file and how I had it formatted. The question is that you'll want to know is, how do you move from this if you do not have any of this previous formatting? How do you get it like that? Now, I'm not going to do any background stuff. You, of course, can add backgrounds. You can add colors, format it how you want to. I'm not going to do that. This is just the way I present it. But the way to basically get rid of these things, you could, of course, go in and, with a time-consuming thing, click on here and backspace it, and then you would have all of those done. But the key is, and the point is how do you do this quickly? Well, here's how you do it. You go to the View tab. Go to the View tab. Now go to Slide Master. Slide Master. Here, this will decide how do you want all of your slides formatted. I want all my slides formatted in a way that I want my title slide, this title box, to have a centered title. I also want it to be smaller, so that's why here I'll even sometimes move it up a bit. You can do this however you want to do it. I also want my text to be bold. I also want it to be in the format of Arial. And so that's just the style that I particularly like. You can format it however you want to do that using the highlight and then right click, pulling up your formatting things, bold, your fonts, your size. You can make it whatever size you'd like. Here's what I also do. I move my title box here. Now also I move my body box up a little more, and I even move it down a little more to give as much space as I want. I also do this, and you can do it on all of your first formats are going to be at this level here. Basically, I backspace it, I highlight it, I place it in my Arial slide. I might decide to bold it, and I also decide to initially maybe make it 40 point, something like that. But basically I move it over, so that gets rid of those dots. Now here you'll notice that's all I'm doing right now is I'm editing the master text style, and if I had other levels I could do those, but since in these particular slides we don't have those other levels, I don't have to mess with that. Now I close master view. Now here you'll notice, look, all of those slides have removed those bullet points, you'll also see that the title is there in the center, and we have it formatted thus. So as you go through, of course, you can go through your text, and here you have slide by slide, and you can go through with your exposition. Now on occasion, if you've placed too much text here, you may have to make some of it smaller, because sometimes there'll be too much in there and it might overlap the box, or you'll have to do maybe some spot reformatting. But hopefully this has helped you to be able to take those bulk slides, the bulk text, divide it into PowerPoint slides more quickly, rather than typing it in or cutting and pasting it per slide. Thank you very much.